In Creo Parametric, you can use the Highlight by Attributes command in a drawing to look for different entities, including bad practices. To access the command, you can go to the Review tab. Here is the Highlight by Attributes command. But before I go into that, I'm going to change the colors of my letters in my drawing. It'll just help things stand out when they're highlighted in purple, red, or green by the command. So let me go to the File menu and then Options, and let's go to System Appearance, and then I will expand Graphics, and here is Letter. The default color is a blue color. I'm going to change it, and I recommend changing it either to a yellow color or a gray color, something like that, to help the thing stand out. Depending on what you're searching for, you might also want to change the default datum color, but I'm just going to change the gray and then click the OK button. And everything looks a bit dimmed, but that's okay. It's going to work well with the Highlight by Attributes command for the most part. So I will click on Highlight by Attributes. The dialog box opens up. Up at the top, we have the different types of entities that we can search for. Then we can choose whether the owner is the drawing and or the 3D model, whether it is on a layer. There are a bunch of dimension types when you select dimension, and also out-of-date references for the dimensions. And we have a button over here for flexible modeling features. And then you can choose whether the objects are going to be displayed in any view, or you can select particular views to search. And let's start out with this first option here for flexible modeling features. When I click on Highlight, well, some different entities have highlighted in green. And as a matter of fact, if you take a look at this 7.62 radius dimension, it's not pointing to where it should be. Also, there is an axis display that is off from the hole, and also that 290.70 dimension. It's not really clear what that is actually dimensioning to. So this is a sign of some details that are no longer accurate due to some flexible modeling features. So there's one thing that you can see. Now that I am aware of that, I'm going to hit the Repaint button so that they are no longer highlighted. And when you're doing your various different searches, you're going to use the Repaint button a lot. Okay, so that's good for the first one. Let me zoom out a little bit. For the next thing that we will search for, let's go to notes. I'm going to save dimensions for last because there are a lot of different things that you can do with that. So I have note selected. I'll leave owner the same. Let's just jump right down to the bottom where it says apply. And hey, there we have a note highlighted. Let me try that again. Apply. You can see that we've got a note up at the top and a note down at the bottom. That's working fine. Now let's try geometric tolerances. I'm going to check that and then uncheck note. And first, let's look for geometric tolerances that actually come from the model. And when I hit the apply button, okay, I can see a couple of geometric tolerances that are highlighting over here. But let's uncheck 3D model. It automatically checked the drawing for the owner. And let me hit the Repaint button before I do my search. I will click on apply. And I see, oh, wait, I see two different ones that are highlighting now. So this geometric tolerance actually comes from the drawing. And there is a geometric tolerance that is used in connection with this note over here. And that comes from the drawing as well. Okay, so now I know a little bit more. Let me hit the Repaint button so stuff is no longer highlighted. The next one, we have an option here for 2D datums and axes. And this actually comes from the Annotate tab. There is a draft datum axis and draft datum plane command, and those really aren't used these days anymore. At some point I may do a video on them, but you probably don't want to be using draft datums anymore. We can search for them in here, and when I click on the, let me check, I'll just leave owner, model, the drawing, that's good. I'll hit apply. And this one is a little hard to see. It actually had some things highlight in purple. Let me repaint and then hit apply again. And there you might have seen that they highlighted in here. All right, let me repaint so that those are no longer selected. Now, another good one to search for, 2D sketched entities. And so that can help you find a really bad practice. And when I click on the apply button, well, I see a bunch of different things highlighted, and also a little hard to see again. Might want to change some other different colors to help this stand out. When I hit the apply button, it actually highlights this entity in purple. And so this is an example of a really bad practice that people do sometimes. Rather than creating a hole in a model, they might go to the Sketch tab and use the different sketching tools in order to draw entities on top of views so that it looks like they are in the model, but they actually aren't. So that's something that you are going to want to do. And one thing about this particular situation, it also highlighted a bunch of sketched points that were displayed. Let me try repainting the screen. They're saying visible on the screen because in this particular situation, it actually showed a layer that they were sitting on. So let me go to the View tab and then go to my layer tree. And I will click on this layer called Hide, right mouse click on it and hide it. That way I am able to get those entities that showed up again to no longer be displayed. Okay, let me collapse my navigator, which came back up. Let me hit the repaint button. For the next thing that we'll take a look at the top of the next list, we have reference dimensions. And I'll look for reference dimensions owned by the drawing. I'll hit the apply button. And oh, there are 3 different reference dimensions that highlight in here. So I might want to say, why do I have these reference dimensions on here? Especially this dimension and this dimension, they are the same. I probably don't need both of those on there. Okay, let me repaint once more. And surface finish and symbol, those are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to use those. Let me uncheck the 2D sketched entity and the reference dimensions. A big one to use in here, dimensions. We can look for different kinds of dimensions. And let me start out by looking for dimensions that are owned by the 3D model. I'm going to uncheck the option for owned by the drawing. I will leave everything else the same. All the different dimension types are checked. I'm going to leave out-of-date references unchecked. Let's hit the apply button. And so now you can see a bunch of different dimensions show up in red. These are actually your model dimensions. Another way to check for those, if I go to the Tools tab, I can switch dimensions, and it's going to toggle dimensions between their numeric form and their symbolic form. You can see that a bunch of the different dimensions here, I apologize for having gray on white, they show up as D46 with D followed by a number. That means that it's a model dimension. But then we see some ADDs, we have some RDDs. If I go to some of the other different views, let me see what else I have over here. I have a DD, so we'll talk about those as well. Let me go back to the Review tab. Let me bring back the Highlight by Attributes dialog box. So again, one thing that you can search for is your model dimensions that are shown. Let me switch dimensions so I get back to the numeric values. Let me go back to the Review tab, bring back that dialog box. And once again, looking for dimensions that are owned by a 3D model. Let's hit the apply button. So all those ones that apply, or excuse me, that show up in red are the actual model dimensions. Now, one thing that you'll hear a lot from people who have been working in Creo Parametric and Pro Engineer a lot is that the majority of your dimensions, 95% of the dimensions, should be shown dimensions. That's actually a pretty good idea in a lot of situations, but take it with a grain of salt depending on the different things that you do. But again, let me hit the apply button. There you see all the different dimensions showing up in red. All right, let's check some of the other different kinds of dimensions. Let's check the box for owned by the drawing. I'm going to uncheck the option 4 owned by a 3D model. And let's just take a look at the ones that are created dimensions and associative, and uncheck the option for non-associative. So with created associative, as you can see from the tooltip, this will highlight dimensions that were created in the drawing and are associative. In other words, they are going to update when the entity being referenced resizes. Okay, so let's see what highlights in that situation. And I'll hit the apply button. And so there we see, I don't know, about 5 different dimensions, 6 different dimensions showing up in a purple color. And so those are some of our manually created dimensions. Those are the ones that showed up with that symbolic form of ADD followed by a number. Let's try changing the options once more. Let's change from the created associative to created non-associative. Let me repaint the screen first. And now I will hit the apply button. And there we have a couple of dimensions highlights in here. And these are actually the ones that showed up with the symbolic form DD followed by a number. These are drawing dimensions. In other words, these are dimensions created for draft geometry. That's another sign that this is actually a sketched in entity as opposed to an actual hole in the model. So that's another good check for your drawings. And now for the last one, let's check for things that are not to scale. And I'll even uncheck both of the dimension types. Let's repaint the screen. And this is the really bad practice. This is the kind of thing that you do not want to see in a drawing. And I will hit the apply button. And I can see that we have a few different dimensions, 3 different dimensions that are highlighting on the screen. The fact that these are not to scale are indications that these dimensions have been overridden, which is probably the worst practice that you can do in a drawing. Let me close out of the highlight by attributes dialog box. Let's take a look at those 3 different dimensions. Let me select this dimension, and it'll bring up its dimension tab. This checkbox over here means that the dimension value is overridden. You can see dimmed out what the nominal value of the dimension is. It is 32 and a whole bunch of change, and someone, me actually, overrid it to a value of 30. Let's try another one. Let's pick on this 40 dimension. And once again, we can see the nominal value was 38.1. And for the sake of this demonstration, I overrid it and changed it to a value of 40. And even this dimension here has a nominal value of 101.6, but the overridden value is 1. So that is a good check with highlight by attributes for dimensions that are not to scale. Let me hit the apply button. So those are overridden dimensions in the drawing. One other thing that I want to mention is that this dimension here has the symbolic form ADD followed by a number. But this other one that is associated with that sketched in circle has DD followed by a number. Same with this one over here. Just to make different things show up in different colors, halfway through preparing this drawing, I changed a drawing detail option. Let me go to File and then Prepare Drawing Properties. I will go to the blue Change hyperlink for detail options. And let me find, I think it's in the 5th group of options where it's like these options, control dimensions. There is an option for associative dimensioning. And I changed that to a value of no. The default value is yes. And with associative dimensioning set to the default value of yes, as you can see in the tooltip, this will associate draft dimensions to draft entities. If you have it set to no, that is what is going to end up creating those DD dimensions as opposed to ADD dimensions. So just one thing to mention for that. All right, let me close out of the detail options dialog box. And so we've used the highlight by attributes to investigate a number of different practices. This is a good tool to use in conjunction with model check. But one last thing to mention, if you are going to change the colors of different entities in your drawing, before you exit out of Creo Parametric, set them back to the default. I just went to File, Options, Options. Once again, I will go to System Appearance. Let me expand Graphics and go to Letter, which I changed. Then I'll go back to Use Default. Any changes that you make in here, well, you can actually save them and have them reread in the next time that you launch Creo Parametric. But I like to change them before I exit out. Let me click on the OK button. And now I have my original default color scheme. But again, highlight by attributes, very useful tool.